Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Anne-Lou, for being here. And we're really, really excited for this talk. I think it's going to be amazing. We're really looking forward to it. So just a really brief introduction for Anne-Lou. I'll let her do the main bit, so I don't want to step on her toes about what she's going to talk about. So Anne-Lou is a product manager, brand manager, working on a lot of different games, which, again, I'm quite excited. I was looking through some of these games, working at Square Enix. Lots of really cool, exciting projects. I don't know whether I can say this, but I do know, well, I know that you've said it publicly, working on an unannounced AAA game, which I'm quite excited about, trying to guess what it might be. So Anne-Lou is, she's a mentor. She's been a mentor multiple times at Limit Break. She was an MCV 13 to 30 in 2019. Cat Quest, when I saw that on your LinkedIn profile, I was very excited. I have maybe watched quite a bit of that. So yeah, please do go check that out afterwards. And make that game. I was very excited. I was a little bit giddy. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to Anne-Lou and talk to you guys about careers tips. Here I am, Anne-Lou.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming as well and listening to me rambling for about an hour. So as Tim has introduced me, I'm Anne-Lou. I currently work at Square Enix. I work for the external studios, so I did want to temper expectations that I don't work on Japanese titles, not even ones that are crossed over with Disney. So whatever I'm working on has nothing to do with that part of the business. My team owns the IPs for Life is Strange, Just Cause, Outriders, and a bunch of other things like Sleeping Dogs and Gex. But our main three titles are the ones I've just mentioned. So I'm brand manager for Just Cause officially, working on unannounced things, but also have worked on a bunch of many other things, I suppose. So yeah, this is, I guess, my version of what I think you need to be mindful of when you're applying for jobs, but also trying to bring a bit of a light on other types of production jobs, because my team has a brand team, but also a production team. We work together to develop games from scratch with a studio. So we start with a blank page, more or less, and then really spend maybe 5, 6, 7 years working on a project before it sees the light of day. And that's how a lot of bigger games are made. And hopefully I can answer your questions, both the ones that I've already received and the ones you might want to ask during this little session. Cool. I guess just to give you a little bit more about my background and how I got here, it was mostly an accident. When I finished my studies, I didn't realize that games was an option for any kind of job, especially for me, because I don't know, it was never brought up, I guess, when I was doing my business degree. But I was unemployed looking for a marketing job, and I was basically in the right place at the right time. And I joined a little marketing studio for PQ. They are a UK-based editor. They do publisher. They do a lot of Japanese games, but also now a lot of indies. That's how I started working on Cat Quest. And I stayed with them for almost 5 years. I was promoted a bunch of times. I did everything from PR to events management and being there physically, but also product and brand management on very different types of products, from racing games to Japanese fighting games to sexy games. And then I joined Square Enix. I started off on Japanese titles as an assistant marketing manager, and I was poached by my current manager to be a global brand manager for Just Cause. So in short, that's about 9 years of my careers with, only 2 employers, but a lot of movement and a lot of different things that I've been able to look at and people I've been able to talk to as well. Cool. So I guess I wanted to start with the profile tips. Just they might sound really obvious, but I do think there is something to be said for. Let's start with the obvious. Make sure you haven't missed it. I have in the past helped with recruitment or recruited people myself, and I do want to address some of the things that I have seen myself and that I think people kind of brush off, but it's a real thing. So first impressions, I think people don't realize that a badly spelled CV, but also the way that it's laid out, is absolutely crucial. So I would encourage everyone to, I don't know, use Canva if you can't, if you don't have Photoshop, for instance, and really tidy that stuff up. A lot of people will spend maybe less than 10 seconds looking at your resume. That's the sad reality of people who work in HR who receive 400, 500 resumes for one job, right? And they're not going to look at everything. So it isn't just, is it eye-catching, but is it also like, can I not see any really glaring mistakes? And at least for me, grammar, syntax, actually really important, because if you're applying for anything where you say, I have great attention to detail, and then you have loads of spelling mistakes in the first lines, that's not going to work. So get other people to look at your resumes. I do that quite regularly for my friends, and we do that for each other, give each other feedback. So it's really crucial. If you have any neurodivergent issues, there are tools that can help you. So don't be discouraged, but also be really, really mindful. The next one for me, focused profile. That's actually why I have pizzas on the first and the last slide of this deck. Is a lot of people think, oh, if I do a bit of everything, or if I show that I'm interested in all of those disciplines, it's going to be great. People are going to think I can do so many things. That actually isn't really true. Once you start specializing yourself, you're actually going to get further by showing that you've dedicated to a craft, a specific area of knowledge. And it's some types of jobs, especially smaller indie companies like PCube, you do need that jack of all trades mindset, because you're going to be in a small team, you're going to need to pitch in. That's really great. However, at some point, when people are recruiting for something, they need to see that you're applying yourself in the right direction, and that you aren't going to be distracted because you're an artist, but you're also a coder, but you like to do, I don't know, like write articles. It's like, just pick a lane, make a profile that does that. If you have loads of skills, great, maybe make a different profile when you're applying to a different type of job, so that your resumes really represent the most best summary of what you're trying to sell for your skills, because you are trying to sell yourself. One other thing that I don't deeply hate AI, but a lot of companies might be using resume readers that will be looking for AI kind of keywords. Those have come up quite a lot. I've seen on LinkedIn from HR people. So there are sort of patterns you can recognize of people who are exclusively using ChatGPT or something else. I would discourage you from doing that, especially early in your career. I know it's hard to make a resume and to present yourself when you don't have a lot of experience, but you do need to work those muscles rather than rely just on external tools. And a lot of people will be put off by AI. It's a very polarizing topic. So if you're obviously using it, it might not be well received by whoever is reading your resume. Now on to some things that are maybe less positive. Unfortunately, there's a lot of setbacks. Maybe it looks like my career has been going swimmingly, but this isn't to say that I haven't actually had, interviews I failed, and jobs I really wanted I didn't get along the way. It's easy, especially when you're starting and you're younger, to think, man, this was my one shot and I didn't get it. I've seen that with mentees I had at Limit Break. It isn't. Life is long and you have no idea what's going to come. So even if you don't get the one thing you wanted, that doesn't mean you should just drop it and not continue working on your craft, producing art, if that's what you're doing, or writing, or, there are ways for you to keep on existing and developing your profile, even if right now no one is looking at it. Don't give up if this is 100% what you want to do. And on that, the practice makes perfect. I think a lot of people kind of turn up and they think they've got it in writing, which is often true. We've got an interview. That means they've seen something they liked in you. Record yourself, do it in front of a mirror, get people to listen to you, look up interview questions that are most likely to happen, and actually say them out loud. I will say I've done a lot of practice in my head, but when I'm doing interviews, I write down answers and questions and I do them out loud, because you can hear yourself tripping up, or you can see how you might be really anxious. getting feedback from other people on how you present yourself is as important as what you're saying. And also getting people to maybe like someone who knows you really well and has known you for a while, or a teacher or a mentor. How do you think, like, what is the best thing I've done, or what's my greatest skill, or what's my, you know, like those silly interview questions, what's your greatest weakness and how blah blah blah. Get people to talk to you about yourself a little bit, so that you can have those things ready to sell in the interview as well. So it isn't just a big when you're in the moment, because it will fly out of your brain. So for me as well, I always have a notebook that's on my lap, so the interviewer doesn't see it, because we mostly do it remote now. And it's okay to take a breath and look at it, but if you've practiced it, your brain will remember it, and it will help you in that moment of stress. Whereas if you come in and you haven't prepared any of that stuff, it will show, it will be a detriment. And when you don't have a lot of experience on your resume, having had at least to think about how you can spin what you've done in your life to fit what they're trying to hire for is actually going to be crucial, because sometimes it's more about how you're selling it than what you've actually done. They want to see how you're thinking. They want to see that you have the ability to like fit in their team culturally and otherwise. So if you've done no prep and you just sort of arrive, or you're super stressed, which happens to, I promise you, everyone, then it will do a disservice to your actual skills and abilities. And then finally, the industry isn't in a good place. I think everybody's aware of it. I'm not trying to be super negative on this, but it is the truth. There are not a lot of jobs, and there aren't a lot of junior jobs. Let's be honest. When I see job descriptions, they're all looking for seniors or leads, and it's a bit of a catch-22 in this industry of we only trust people who've already done something, and therefore if you've done nothing because nobody's trusted you, you can never get your foot in the door, which is also why I'm doing these talks today and tomorrow, because I think we need to open the door to more people. So I do want people to just be realistic, at least as of right now, mid-2025. It's a tricky thing. The only thing I can say is if you don't have tangible work experience in the games industry, that doesn't mean that stuff you're not doing outside, game jams, other types of jobs, projects that you're leading by yourself won't count for something. It's just you're going to be competing against literally thousands of people who've been laid off, who do have experience. So right now, it's not really about you and what you've done or not done. It's also like, this is a very tough moment for the games industry. It will bounce back. I've already seen encouraging signs of development in the right direction, but you never know what's going to happen, right? So keep going, but you know, the games industry isn't the only interesting industry out there. If it isn't working out right now, it doesn't mean it's never. Cool. So those were some quick things I always want to bring up when I'm talking to people. We received a few questions, so thank you very much for those. I'm happy to go through them one by one, and obviously like bounce back if anything comes up in the chat. Okay. So the first one about the development lifecycle, how do I decide when it's best to market a game? So for the bigger games that I've been working on, the campaign planning usually starts very early on, because we'll have, I guess, like a production schedule and say like, our launch is around here, we'll need to start thinking, you know, but it's very loose. So often there'll be many iterations about this. They will change literally hundreds of times. It's actually one of the worst parts of my job, is doing the same PowerPoint every week for months on end with very small changes. So, but the thing is, most of this is never set in stone. The things I wanted to say to you guys in the context of what you're doing is that you're going to need to be thinking about your development resources really early on. And that means that I would want you to start thinking about this between your vertical slice, if you have one, and your alpha at the absolute latest, but ideally earlier than that. So the things that I've noticed a lot when I've seen pitches, and even when I worked on games we just started signing at PQ, but also working with the Square Enix collective, you arrive, you're a marketing person, and you say, this game is interesting. How about a demo? And then the production team comes down and shouts at me because I've asked for something that asks for a lot of development time, which is also money at that stage. And they can't. They literally can't. Everything's been scheduled and locked in, and we've signed for X amount of money, and we can't give you more because you need 6 more weeks to do a demo. That wasn't planned. So I would encourage, I guess, everyone to start thinking about this really early on, whether or not you want a publisher, by the way. Think about the genre of the game that you're working on and what kind of marketing or marketing tools you want to be doing. And then in your production schedule, do you want a demo? Do you want to do early access? Do you want a public beta? What kind of community engagement are you going to be able to give? Especially, you know, if you want to do like a public development timeline, which a lot of indie devs like doing. Yeah, so quite early on. And also I think everybody underestimates the amount of development resource that you're going to be doing to help on the marketing side. So I would build some buffer as well in whatever timeline you have in your head. And also after that, the type of marketing that you want to do is probably a much bigger discussion that I won't get into right now, but it's never, there's never like a perfect recipe, but earlier is better in all cases.
And Lou, you mentioned something there. Sorry to interrupt, just while we're still on this subject, you mentioned whether or not you want a publisher. How would someone make that decision about whether or not they did want to self-publish or go to another publisher? And if they did want to find a publisher, how would they do that, and who would they choose? That's like 4 questions all at once. I do apologize.
That's a big question, yeah. So in terms of, I guess the real problem with indie development is, do you have the money, right? Are you going to be able to live from your, or do you want to try and live from being a developer, in which case you're going to need funding probably, or are you independently wealthy, which is rarely the case, and do you have the physical bandwidth to have a full-time job and also develop a game at the same time? That's a lot of work, especially once you get into like proper development in full production. So I think it comes down to money and also your ability to withstand. You'd be crunching for like 3 years with no holiday. Are you prepared to do that? It's a lot to ask. Now, in terms of finding publishers, there are a few resources out there that list who's going to those pitching events, right? That's what you need to be looking for. The face-to-face is really important. So go to all of those kind of pitching events. There's loads in the UK. There's budget travel is a big question, but like, you know, the PAX East, PAX West, they have those spaces as well. There's some all over the world, really, depending on where you're based, but we're in the UK. And there is, I think he's a great resource, Rami Ismail, right? He has a spreadsheet that he's made readily available that lists all sorts of indie publishers. If available, he also talks about what kind of deal sheet they give to devs, and if there have been any red flags that have been mentioned by previous devs as well. So I think he's made all of that available. He has a website, he has Twitter/X and other channels. So he's, for instance, like a great source of trusted indie advice where you can find those things. And there are plenty of, you know, DEF CON, Gamescom has a dedicated pitching thing, the meet to match stuff, etc. So there are a lot of fairly cheap ways for you to at least go and talk to publishers face to face. You just need to be, I guess, you have, you know, a pitch. Can you have ideally a vertical slice so you can really show what you're going for? One thing I will warn against is the collective, for instance, at Square, they have an email where people send them pitches. And what we get a lot of is a single page Word document that says, hey, I've got this idea about like Cloud from Final Fantasy in a puzzle game. And that's it. That's the pitch, right? And oddly enough, that is not a pitch. So when you're going for those things, you have to be at a stage where you're ready to pitch. So it also, there's one last thing I want to hit on actually, is your IP ownership and what you're willing and ready to, I guess, cede control of. So most publishers will not ask you for IP ownership. If they do, that actually means they think your game's going to make loads of money and they want to make it instead of you. But also that means your game is really good. it's like, do you want someone to be making the art in your stead for the front of the page on Steam, that kind of stuff? Are you ready to give them that level of control on what you're doing? I think a lot of people are, but sometimes I remember seeing one of my colleagues at PCube having a fight with a dev in Korea about the order in which the screenshots were laid out on the Steam page, like a full-on shouting match, which was, when you think about it, insane. But the guy was very passionate about his game, and my colleague was extremely adamant, like, I know best because you've hired me to do this job. So it's, I guess, that level of what are you willing to put up with in terms of relinquishing control? And if you don't know anything about it, you probably need someone to help you with the marketing and production stuff. I'm not just talking about my job, but people who help put you on store pages. There's a bunch of hoops you have to jump through and setups on the platforms, which is also like really helpful if you know that you only want to focus on your dev and your coding. So it really depends on your bandwidth and your knowledge base on all of this, I guess.
Thank you. Sorry for adding 15 questions to that one question.
No, I think it was really good, and I hope it gives like a more insight as to like how you might want to make that decision. It's a big decision, to be honest, and it can also take quite a while to find the right partner. Second question was more marketing based, about marketing campaigns depending on your IP. I will say in the context that we're on right now, newer IPs will have more of an uphill battle than, you know, longer established brands, especially because people's attention span right now is so short, and I hope that one day we'll reverse it. But I think when I started doing advertising, we had 10 seconds at the beginning of a video to capture people's attention. The current recommendation from social platforms is between 3 or 4. So in less than 10 years, you have 3 seconds to get people interested in whatever you're trying to sell on social media when you're scrolling. And look at your own behavior. How often do you stop on an ad if it hasn't captured you in 3 seconds, right? So that's definitely something to think about in 1 second, yes. So it is a real challenge. It's interesting that Neo the World Ends With You was mentioned, because that was actually a bit of an uphill battle in and of itself, because there's so much time had passed between the two games that it wasn't like a AAA brand. So my experience, and I guess what my job is finding the balance of when is the right time for people to be paying attention to your game at this one given time, right? That's usually your announcement. That's your biggest moment. People think the launch is going to be bigger in terms of PR, but unless you're CD Projekt Red, that's not going to happen. Your biggest moment is your announcement, unless you're doing a shadow drop. And the idea is that marketing's job is, we've announced, people might have paid attention, and then I'm going to poke at them again to try and rekindle their interest at dedicated time. You can buy people's sort of mental space by, instead of asking them to buy, you just show them ads that like, remember this, it's cool, look at how pretty it is, right? Like those kind of ads that don't have any call to action. That's a media buying strategy. That's not cheap, and that takes a lot of assets, because usually you need to have a whole suite, we call them, of ads that are all different, that show different things, so that you're never bored and not seeing the same thing over and over again. So that's actually very expensive. So I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule about it. If you look at Cyberpunk, right, they did their PR and they comes 3 or 4 years before they actually launched it, and then you have a game like Clair Obscur Expedition 33 that just sort of exploded on launch and nobody had heard about it, and it was a big surprise. I will say the reason why big brands do big announcements and then go quiet is often that they have they're publicly listed companies, and so it's better for their stock market and their stakeholders to do a big announcement, because then their value goes up and the stakeholders make money. That's why we have big announcements in the industry. There are very few brands that are so well established they don't need to market. So basically GTA, which have announced that they're not going to do any marketing because they're just like, we don't care, guys, we're that good. And they are. And then maybe like a few Nintendo titles like Mario Kart. Everybody knows Mario Kart, right? Or Pokemon. But the rest of us mortals, yes, the internet is marketing GTA for them. They don't have to do anything. the rest of us marketers do have to, I think the balance is, where are you in development? What can you show? So sometimes your game looks garbage a long way in development and you don't really want to show that. And where the market is, which is why I'm saying there isn't a super strict rule, is, let's be honest, a lot of our releases and how we think about our calendar is we look at our competitors and we say like, oh, GTA is in May. Guess what? No one else is going to launch anything on the 26th of May because there is no point. But it's not the only, like GTA is an outlier. If you're launching a JRPG and then you know that one of your biggest competitors has something the week before, you give it space. I'm pretty sure Yoshida said that he had like given space to the Elden Ring DLC last year. That's why the Final Fantasy XIV DLC was delayed. Well, not delayed, but like launched later because he wanted to play Elden Ring, but he also knew that it's a lot of overlapping audiences. And then finally, there's one last like really unsexy reason. It's called the fiscal year, which is 1st of April to 31st of March. And at least for a company like Square, we have budgets that are based on revenue. But if your game launches in June of next year and you need to do all of your marketing this year, you don't have any budget for it because the revenue is scheduled for the next fiscal year, not the next calendar year. And that's actually a massive headache of how can you advertise at the right time without having any budget for this fiscal year. But that's, that's my headache, I suppose. That's why I'm here. Right now, I would say shorter campaigns seem to be slightly more successful unless you have a real reason to unveil like weeks and weeks of content. I don't think people have the bandwidth unless there's a super big announcement, but you're always going to be competing with AAAs that take up all of the air. So short, and an expression the Americans quite like is bombs, not bullets, when you're doing your advertising on your marketing. So instead of doing little trickles here and there, can you make a splash in a few more controlled moments in a shorter space of time and get people interested while you have them, instead of hoping that they'll remember you in 3 years? That works with small community stuff, but if you want to branch out a bit and get a bit more mainstream, at the moment, shorter is probably better. Right. Next question was the product and brand manager deciding about the USPs about marketing a game. So yes, that's usually my job. When I was at P-Cube, I mostly did it by myself. At Square, we have a bigger team, so we'll talk with PR and community and communication. So it's a bit more of a group effort, I would say. So the one thing is how we decide is, in an ideal scenario, it should jump out at me. If I can't see what makes your game unique and interesting, we have a problem. If I'm slapping 3 adjectives on your game that I could slap on every other game in your genre, why am I buying your game? And why are other people going to buy your game? That's a real problem. So there is a very sexy strategy tool called the brand pyramid. That's like a whole different session to do just on that, but you can find them online. You can look at like people explaining how it goes, and you can find the graph. It's literally just a pyramid. But the idea is that there's a lot of strategy that goes into, at least for what I'm doing. If you're working on a smaller title, I wouldn't say like spend months and months on it, but it can be quite lengthy. What makes my game unique? What am I doing that's it's called table stakes? That's mandatory for my genre. So for instance, if you're playing a shooter or you're launching a shooter and your guns are rubbish and the shooting doesn't feel good, that's the legs of your table are rubbish and therefore your table will crumble, right? So what are you doing that is mandatory for your genre? People won't mention it, but if you don't have it, people will crap on you. So that's the sort of stuff that we have to look at. And then how are people gonna feel when they look at your art, when they feel your game? There's a few more things around that are all in the brand pyramid again. But yeah, in an ideal scenario, I can see what I want to sell really quickly, and then those will be the pillars that I'm moving forward. Communications and arts and mechanics, it can be any of those. Sometimes it isn't about the game, it's about the developers, there's a story there, whatever. So that there's my mouse did something all on its own. So there's a lot of finesse, I guess, and nuance. I would say it's really important. There was one bit of the question, does it vary from game to game? It is literally never the same. If it's the same, then you have a bad marketer or you have a game that doesn't stand out enough. So they should be as bespoke as possible to what you're doing. And when you're thinking about your game and making a pitch deck, they have to be really precise with what you're doing specifically. It cannot be just applied to any old stuff that's similar to yours. That's really bad. And then finally, so as I said, you can find the brand pyramid online. I think the mindset is strategy versus tactics, which most people don't understand because they use two words interchangeably. So my job is strategy. When I was doing more regional marketing, that's tactics. When you're doing something tangible, I'm doing strategy. I'm looking at the big picture, and from there, the tactics will come. So yeah, you can. Oh, Jesus, my mouse hates me today. That never happens. Sorry. And then the last thing I will say, something I saw at P-Cube as well that I wanted to bring up just because it's very easy when you're developing a game to focus on something that you see is trendy. I think there was 1 year where we saw like an absolute like overdose of pixel art games, and some of them were super cute, some of them were very like edgy, but it was just like that 1 year everybody was doing pixel, and then in the past couple of years everybody's doing cozy games, for instance, right? And you think that there's going to be an opening for you in a couple of years in the same genre. Sometimes that's a false friend, so I just wanted to bring that up as well in terms of catching people's attention. If you're following a trend that's been around for a while, it's going to be less likely that you succeed, just because people are going to look at it like, oh my god, I've seen so many of those pitches, what are you doing that's different enough? And sometimes different isn't only visually, like, is it quirky, is it unique, is the art style, there's so many ways that you could be doing it different. It doesn't have to be everything is brand new, but don't follow trends, because I don't think it works unless you're at the forefront of it. And then people who receive pitches, they receive a lot more than you think, and they can, you can start seeing patterns. That gets a bit tricky. So when you're doing USPs, what are you doing that's actually unique and bespoke to yourself?
So when people are receiving pitches, and Lou, like let's say a few years ago everyone was doing pixel games and now everyone's doing cozy games, does that mean now is a good time to pitch pixel games if you had one but you missed the boat? Or is it like still the same people are seeing the pitches, it still needs to be way more unique than all the pixel games they saw a couple of years ago?
No, like everything is cyclical, right? It's like fashion. You like, if you pitch your pixel game right now, that's fine. I'm just saying there was like a weird convergence of pixel lovers in 2018 that felt like we couldn't get out of it, I guess. It's gone now. People are doing other stuff. So if you're doing a pixel game, great. You will probably get people interested because the art is less prevalent when you're looking on the store page. So it's just
people's attention span is terrible. So they've forgotten.
Yeah. And they, forget stuff, backlog. So I can think of a few right now, but not as many as when I was working at P-Cube getting pitches like every week with pixels. So it's just, be aware of what's going on in your market, in your genre as well, specifically, because it's not because you're doing pixel game that's if you're not doing a 2D platformer, that's probably better, because we did get a lot of platformers. So it's not just like one feature that's overdone. It's just there are trends. If you arrive too late, you might be doing yourself a disservice. Cool. And then branding and marketing, do I like to focus more on art or mechanics? So the sad reality of our world is everything is visual. So when you're dating, even if the person's fucking incredible, if you find them really unattractive, you're not going to swipe on them. When you're picking a book cover in a store or even a video game, the thumbnail is so important. A YouTube video is the same thing, right? Like, do you click on the guy that's making the funny face, or do you click on the really dry, drab thumbnail? Usually you click on the funny face. We came across a game a couple of years ago that was really well designed, good puzzle mechanics, really fun to play. And the UI was all simplistic, black and white. But the problem was when you put it in the Steam page, literally nobody would see it because the UI is gray, and the guy's thing was black, white, and gray. And I was like, I think you have a good game here, but you need to do some visual work because nobody's gonna see it. It's really hard for me to sell something that nobody can look at without, like, you know, getting their attention catched, especially because we're overloaded with information. In my experience, it is easier to sell a really pretty turd than a really interesting but ugly game, which isn't to say that if your game's not good, it's gonna sell amazing, because that's a problem for the punch loss team, you know, PR community. They're not gonna have a good time, but at least I have, you know, like, bemused people with my pretty artwork and gotten people's attention more easily than if you have exceptional mechanics, but I can't sell them because visually it's just not appealing. So both are really important from when you're preparing your product pitch, but it's always easier when it's pretty, let's be honest. Cool. So that was all the questions. I checked just before the call, there was nothing else. So moving on to a couple of, I guess, other game jobs. This isn't everything ever, but I did want to bring the attention. So obviously, being a game dev, coding, there's a lot of different jobs already in there. But for instance, the other half of the team I work in is the production team, and there are a lot of roles there that are game dev adjacent, I suppose, but you get to do something with the game. It's just isn't directly making it, and for some people that might be better suited to what they want to do. I would say for production roles specifically, you have to be pretty organized. So I would encourage everyone to look at project management training softwares, and you have to be pretty comfortable with enjoying scheduling and spreadsheets. So I appreciate if you have more of an artistic background, that's probably not very exciting to hear. However, there's some really exciting stuff to be doing if you're a producer or a project manager, and those are jobs that are actually needed. So there are people being recruited in all of the disciplines that I'm laying out. So those are people who work on the team with me. We have like 6 designers, and when I say designers, I mean game designers. So they're thinking about in-game, like currency mechanics, how does the UI look, are we like building people up in terms of like the levels that you're getting at, is it with the progression smooth, am I having the right experience? So there's a lot of really interesting things that you could be doing. Same with narrative designers, they don't just write a story, they do a lot of really cool stuff, actually. Like we recorded some mock-up stuff on Life is Strange, right? They go to the sessions, they check that the acting performances are right, that they're following the dialogue, they give feedback, they help obviously like guide the story. They're not the ones writing it because that's the devs. But yeah, so there's a lot of sort of adjacent things. And then finally, if you're an artist but you don't necessarily, or you've done game dev artist, but you want to move away from it, we have an art director and a marketing artist on the team. So they help lead the overall visual of the game, but also help design the UI, all of the icons, the color choices, the textures. So there's actually a lot of work that goes into obviously making a game that can be supported even if you're not in a development team through all of those production roles. And then for the non-tech roles, so that's, I guess, more like my part of the business. I've seen a lot of people over the years, especially during Limit Break, who try to get in the games industry, sort of the communications side. And I do want to say that it isn't always the magnificent gateway that you might think it is. One thing for instance, QA, I've come across people who say, like, I started in QA because I hoped to get further and out of it, and that they really struggled to get out of it. QA is absolutely essential. It is, however, very hard work, very demanding. And I know people who have done QA who are doing other things now, but I also know people who do QA who have not managed to get out of it. So I just don't want people to like have unrealistic expectations of QA being like the back door of the games industry. Same for, I would say, everything that's around community or social media management. a lot of people think that's the easier way in. It's actually less and less easy. People are very, I would say, demanding when they do interviews about like, can you show me your numbers? Have you used any platform tools that you can help you manage your profiles? Are you doing any partnerships? So it used to be pretty like, yeah, you can just talk to people on Twitter. That's how I was introduced to community work. It's just like, here's the Twitter handle and password, sort it out, say something. To be honest, that backfired. I said a lot of shit I shouldn't have, but it was a smaller business, so it was fine. So yeah, I just want to say, obviously, those are really interesting jobs and they're really necessary. I will say community and social media managers, the mental health you have to have is like, resilience is really important for those jobs. And they're also really specialized in the kind of knowledge that you need to have, which is totally different from all of the technical jobs. So I wouldn't just think, I can just do that for a while and make some tweets and talk on Discord and it's fine. There's actually a lot of discipline and often a lot of asset creation as well. So you do need to have abilities on the Adobe Suite, for instance, to be really successful. And then just to give, I guess, a small overview, I work, I guess, in marketing and comms usually. So I was a product manager, but some people would say marketing manager, and now I'm a brand manager, and they're all different things, but they all kind of fall in the same thing. We have people who do PR who are now communications leads, which is slightly different in the mindset. And finally, if you are a creative person, but you don't want to work in dev anymore, we do usually need creative marketing artists, I guess, or creative managers who will do either production of, like we have a creative team at Square. They have 4 people who are just producers to help manage the workload of the stuff that needs to be done. They don't actually do the design themselves, but there's beautiful Gantt chart and Jira board that's available for them to manage. So there's stuff there, like, again, project management comes back as a really like a key focus point for all of those roles. And then you can be making box art. That's actually very time consuming. You can be making assets for a marketing team. You can be doing videos or static assets. There's a lot there that you can do outside of pure game dev artwork. And hopefully helps expand, I guess, your career options. A lot of things that you learn from one can be applied to others. It's just about how you're going to spin that when you're doing interviews, potentially. And that was it. And now, if anybody has any questions, we have a bit of time to talk about that. Equally, if nobody has any questions, that's okay.
Well, that was great, Anne. Thanks a lot for that. We do have a few questions, but everyone else, you can put in the chat or raise your hands as well if you've got any questions. So, yeah. A few questions that we had and that we prepared for was talking about like the career stuff again, maybe as a developer or as an artist. Do you think it is better to specialize, or do you think it is better to be a generalist and know a bit of everything? Is it better to be like just focusing on like one piece of technology or one aspect of game development? So
it's a good question because it's a little bit of both. I would be inclined to say at some point you need to specialize, just because if I'm recruiting you to be like a 3D artist, I don't need you specialist, generalist. It's really important to come in and say like, this is what I can do, this is my expertise, rather than I can do a bit of this, I can do a bit of that. I think it helps you present yourself better. Obviously, the real trick is, do you have like an ace in the back of your pocket? So if you're ever at risk of redundancy, say like, hey, I can actually also do this. That's great, right? That helps protect you. But yeah, I think specializing is more important. Also, it's the brand pyramid, not the grand pyramid. That would make a big difference in your Google search.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. We've got a question from Thomas as well. He's asking, do you recommend getting a job in software development until the industry bounces back?
I would maybe give it, I mean, it depends on your level of experience. If you've already got training and you're ready to go in, look for jobs right now. Maybe do something outside of the games industry to have experience, so that when you see a job for like mid-level, right? Like that's all I'm seeing is right now is quite senior jobs. So the thing is, how are you getting the experience to get in? I would expect the industry will sort of bounce back in the next 2 years. I thought it would start this year, and it has a little bit, but then there were a bunch of EA layoffs last week. I'm like, not quite. So yeah, I would always keep, I guess, your ear to the ground, but you need to build up your experience, even if it's not in games, rather than just hope the door will be available in 2 years.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Basil has asked, what are the best ways to learn and develop project management skills?
So there should be courses online that you can find. There are definitely a bunch of tools that you need to be familiar with. So the Gantt chart with 2 T's, Gantt, is like everybody's best friend, if you like charts, I guess. So I don't. I mean, actually, I find Gantt charts really useful. I don't have the patience to set one up for like 2 years worth of campaign planning, but it is genuinely really helpful. I would encourage you to try and get training on a bunch of tools. So a lot of devs use Jira, which I don't like. It's too techy for what I need to do. There are so many tools available. It's actually a bit overwhelming, but Wrike, Wrike is a big one. Monday, Asana. Yeah, Jira is overwhelming, but Jira is owned by Confluence, and they also own Trello. Trello is a good way to there is a free version of Trello as well, so you can just start playing with those tools, so that you also have those keywords on your resume. If people often do searches by keywords when they're recruiting for a job, so having the ability to say, I have even just taught myself the basics on Wrike, on Trello, on Jira, etc., is important. And you can play with those. I know people who use Trello for their personal life, for instance. So you could I don't know, are you planning a party or a date, and just make a little chart, a bunch of tickets, and see if you can just understand how the mindset goes. And it's all about the dependencies. How long does this take? Is it going to block the next step in my process? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you should be able to find online. And there are, I think, dedicated project management courses. I've never been on one, but I know they exist. And I know, for instance, production people often go on them, and they're quite focused short courses. You probably have to pay for some of them, but they do exist as I think 4 weeks of training once a week, and then you have a bunch of homework. There are stuff out there.
For sure. Thank you. What else have we got here? Luke has asked, how can we go about looking for jobs, and what's the best way about looking for jobs and jobs?
So my main I'm always looking, you never know, right? Yeah. My main things are obviously having a LinkedIn profile that's nice, up to date, and then following a bunch of companies that interest you, and eventually you will grow your network also, so that you can see other people posting jobs. There is one LinkedIn page called, I think, Game Dev Jobs, with a purple controller icon, and then they just post stuff that's happening every day, basically. That's you want to be looking for those aggregation pages that do some of the work for you, because if you had to go look after every indie dev, you would spend your whole day looking for stuff every day. And then there's one really great platform called Hitmarker, which again, they do an aggregation. It is worldwide, so unfortunately right now there's a load of American jobs that sound great, but I don't want to move to the US. So but you have European, fully remote. It's just they're gonna focus more on the bigger companies. If you're looking for specifically a really small company business, I think social media is also a great way, as in follow the people who interest you on other platforms outside of LinkedIn. And then I've recently seen even Indeed, if you just literally look game dev jobs, a bunch of places have now developed filters specifically for game dev jobs, which wasn't the case, and there were a load of production and tech jobs right now. And finally, there's a lot of recruitment agencies, well, a few recruitment agencies that are game exclusive, so Datascope, Archivart Swift, there's another one, games, like there's a few of those basically that you can find. They're not perfect. They're a bit elitist sometimes, but they do exist. Amicus with a Q.
For sure. Thank you. Imogen, what's your hand?
Yeah, I was just wondering because I know, so as a brand manager, you probably work a lot with artists when developing marketing campaigns. I just wanted to know when you are looking for artists, whether they are for a marketing campaign, like a generalist, or someone you want to work with your team long term, do artists have a better chance if they also have technical implementation skills that can sort of like cross over, so they can sort of not be a jack of all trades, but sort of help out, so you know they have that skill set? Because as myself and before now, I've been an artist, but I've never really had the technical skills up until for the last couple of weeks now. So, and that's the part I've been trying to sort of push forwards along with my art.
Okay. When you say technical skills, do you mean like the ability to go in engine and do?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So I think there will be very few roles where you need to do both, but it never hurts that you have that knowledge. In those kind of cases, I would say a lot of agencies, like creative agencies, would be more interested in that than people like who are in publishing jobs like me. A lot of stuff that we're looking for when we look for artists in my team is it isn't always super fun for the artists, to be honest, because you're resizing the key art 12 times for the store pages. It's a lot more than 12, actually. A lot of sizes. And you're doing like box art, which is extremely, like box inlays, they're called. And that's extremely constraining. So you have a lot of like really dry things to be doing. If you want to be doing actual drawing and potentially using like in-engine stuff, most of those roles will be with agencies or like freelancers who have bespoke, like I need someone to do one thing for me. I need a sequencer thing for a CGI trailer, that kind of stuff. Often we go externally because we don't need someone to have those skills internally all the time, but we might need a trailer for 6 months, that kind of stuff. So creative agencies, what's their name? Keyword Studios basically own 80% of the agencies in the UK. So have a look on there.
It was called? Sorry?
Sorry?
What did you say that company was called that owns 80%? Could you repeat that?
Keywords Studios. They own so many creative agencies. It's actually staggering. They have a lot of, I don't know if they're recruiting because I don't have any creative skills, so I'm not looking at them. But they have the kind of people like yourself who can do both art and more like in-engine stuff. Those would be the people looking for you.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome.
I have a question. I'm curious. It was Norfolk Game Developers. No, what's it called? Norfolk Games Festival last week. And there was a lot of focus on board games towards the beginning of the week. And I spoke to someone about game publishing and how they were doing it. And one of the things they talked about was Kickstarter. I wonder what your thoughts are on, because you can self-publish, you can go to another publisher, or self-publish is basically Kickstarter. And I wonder what your thoughts are on publishing games on Kickstarter, if you agree with it or don't agree with it, and then if you do agree with it, like what tips would there be for people wanting to make indie games or something like that?
Funny you say that. Yeah, so I have nothing against people who do Kickstarter, and the other one is itch.io, right, as a really good platform, which with good revenue share. I've seen a lot of successful stuff on it. I think actually PCube tried to do a Kickstarter. You can look it up, Project Parappa, the rapper. We had like two well-known Japanese devs come up with this idea. So I can tell you what we learned from this exceptional mistake. It was like a really interesting project and people were really excited about it, but we opened the Kickstarter really early on and we had nothing to show. So we were asking people to, I guess, front up money for literally a bunch of concept art and words on a page that said, we'll do all of this, blah, blah, blah. And obviously it wasn't enough to convince people. So I think it's about sadly, how you brand yourself when you go on those platforms. Not to say that what you're trying to sell isn't important, but how you're selling it is going to be so much more relevant. How are you going to cut through all of the noise of people asking, people for money all the time? We're all being asked to pay for stuff all the time. So what are you saying and selling that's different? And also, are you going to be talking to the right people on the right platforms, right? So there's a communication strategy. And also, I would say really like you can't go in and just hope it works out. Kickstarter has a deadline as well of how long your project can run for. So it really like puts the urgency of like, you need to be ready, you need to look good, you need to be like lining up. Can you have journalists talk about you? Now it's more influencers, right? So it's make the noise in 30 days or self-fund another way, I guess. But yeah,
It's really good if you're not good at like keeping yourself on track, make a Kickstarter and say you have to be on track. You've got 30 days, go.
And then you can refresh the page every day, like, where am I?
Yeah, that aligns almost exactly with what the guy was talking about in the board game industry as well. You have to have something to market. You have to have a video, even though half the people who back aren't going to watch the video. You have to be active on Kickstarter, so have some pledges. My favorite tip, I will share this. Sorry, I know I'm answering my own question, but I just remembered it. I thought it was really funny. One of the best tips if you're doing a Kickstarter campaign is to have like that you've already backed other projects, and he's like, and a secret tip is back a whole bunch of projects that aren't going to meet their target, so you never have to pay anything, but you've got a whole bunch of back projects that you've backed on your profile.
Sneaky.
I didn't say that.
Play the algorithm. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, I was just more wondering about like obviously with the moving forward in a sense of like, so you do get the interview. Is there any like sort of big questions that you might be asked during an interview that like you kind of should be prepared for in most regards? Because like as someone who's come from an administration background, a lot of the time I'd be asked about certain things like how well do you know how to use spreadsheets and like what formulas can you use to be able to push it forward? Is there anything like is there anything like sort of like that where it would be beneficial to kind of like think about now before we even get to that point?
I guess the biggest thing for me is that almost every interview I've done, the thing is, it also like it depends on your discipline, right? So I can only speak from my experience in the marketing and communication sort of family of jobs. They're always going to ask me, do you have an example of when you led a campaign or you faced they love this one, like you faced a difficult situation and how did you address? I actually have written a list of interview questions that I can share with Akshat after the call, and he can like send to all of you guys of stuff I always prepare myself to read about and have questions and answers ready for before the interview, so that I've thought about it. So there's a whole list. It's a lot longer than you think. And the other thing that's really important is sometimes they might ask you to introduce yourself, and it's a really good way to have a really good pitch ready in like 60 seconds. When my little brother started looking for a job, I made him like, tell me about yourself. And then he would overrun for like 3 minutes, like, shut up, tell me why you're cool and why I want to hire you in 60 seconds max, right? So it's also I would try to think about like, it doesn't have to be like a funny anecdote, but what are you going to say that's going to stand out a bit in the sense that people might remember you for something a bit different than just run-of-the-mill questions.
Okay, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got one more question from Robert Henry. Says, I've been wondering if and how to get funding for an RPG I'm making that could take 2 to 3 years to make, especially if I'm not sure I won't get distracted with a different project or not finish it at all.
I'm going to be honest, the way that the question is phrased, if I were receiving or meeting you for a pitch, would be like red flag city. So first thing first, rephrase everything you've written. I understand this is like obviously like a casual chat. Just if you get funding and you don't deliver on your project, usually the minimum guarantee, it's called like an MG that a publisher would be looking to give you, needs you to deliver a product, and if you don't deliver, you're in breach of contract, you need to give that money back, right? So I would be quite mindful of asking for money, even if it's like government, right? There are funds from UK governments or regional funds that can support you as a young indie dev trying to make it. All of those will probably have contingencies if you don't actually do anything with it. So I would look for government regional supports. Maybe like talking to Yuki, right, is a good way to try and get some tips of how to get in touch with people in your region, or what kind of support you'd be looking for that is from the government rather than a publisher. But I will say there isn't free money available out there. It's all going to come with strings attached. So if you're not convinced that you can make it, I would like reduce the scope of what you're trying to sell. And also, if you don't have anything to show at the stage where you're trying to maybe talk to a publisher or something, you're going to really struggle. Like I said, like if it's just a white page with a bunch of lines, nobody's going to fund that unless you know some really rich people in your life. That's the reality of it. Like, people are very cautious about investing in games right now. They're all looking for the pedigree, right? Have you done something? Do you know someone? Do you have an artist that's famous? Do you you know, like, what's the thing I can sell that I can help me like make you more visible when I'm signing a product? If you're coming and you just hope that somebody's going to fund an RPG that you may not finish, I think you will set yourself up for failure, and also really uncomfortable legal discussion.
Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, cool. Are there any other questions? And if not, then I think this is the time to wrap it up. But we will be back the same time tomorrow as well, and talk a bit more about pitching, a bit more about funding, a bit about starting your own studios. So yeah, for sure. I think there's going to be a lot more questions about those things that you can ask tomorrow as well to Andrew.
Yes.
But yeah, thanks a lot for this. Yeah.
Sorry, one last thing I wanted to finish on. Last year when I did Limit Break, we had like a Style Mentor chat. And one line really stuck with me, which was kind of relating to the question around specialist or generalist. When you go to a buffet, you might be picking a bunch of foods, but none of them are going to be good because they're a buffet and they don't specialize in any of it, right? When you're presenting your resume or your profile to someone, you have to be the pizza from the pizzeria, not the buffet, because people don't want a bunch of little things that you sort of know how to do. They want to see that you're an expert and that also you're going to be delicious. So be a pizza, not a buffet when you're presenting yourself is the final word for me, for people to remember. We have one more question.
Ooh, yes, we do. It's from Basil. He says, what kind of pitches are you personally hoping to see come out of the indie world?
Personally, I'm a really bad gamer, so this is in the sense that I have fairly mainstream taste. No, that's not true. I do play indies. I guess it's a very personal taste thing, right? But what I hope to see is, for me, really interesting ways to deliver narrative. I always go back to unpacking as a way to give you a narrative that had literally no words. I thought that was really smart. I've been playing Thomas Was Alone on my boyfriend's recommendation. Again, like a really interesting way to deliver a story with also like quite a cheap way of doing it, speaking as someone who has to look at localization costs for indies. So I always find storytelling that isn't just literally exposition through a CGI or loads of text that not everybody likes reading, stuff that makes it more accessible as well. Accessibility is really important right now and I really appreciate that. I'm left-handed and I have really bad motion sickness, so any way of presenting narrative and storytelling in an unusual style, I think is really exciting.
Awesome, thanks for that.
If you have time, Lou, there is one more question, but then I'll say we'll if you have any questions, write them down and bring them tomorrow.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're happy to answer Luke's, sorry for the but would you recommend being honest with audiences if progress is slow? I've seen other companies not do anything and receive backlash. Great question.
This is a good question. So my personal opinion as a professional, but also as a gamer, is that I always encourage transparency. The reality is, if you work for a bigger business, there are a lot of people sort of managing what you're allowed to say and not say. Square is a really good example about this. I think it's a mistake. We're in a world where communication is instant all the time. People draw their own conclusions. People are also more aware of how games get made than ever before. Although I will say there's a lot of misconceptions. But anyway, being honest is better, right? Because your community gives you that trust. That's why they become your community. If you betray it by fundamentally like lying to them or deceiving them on your time frame, you will lose that trust, and that's the most important resource that you have until they start buying your game. So I wouldn't squander that trust for. Sometimes it's not that big of a deal. I think also people, if you're upfront and clear in your communication, yes, people are frustrated and they lash out and they're keyboard warriors, but most of the time it isn't that big of a deal, unless, like even, Cyberpunk, GTA, I think that they were okay, right? They recovered from. So yeah, transparency always for me. Not everybody agrees with that statement, but that is my recommendation.
Thank
If you
you.
are going to be really delayed, make sure that Keanu Reeves is linked to your project and you'll probably be okay.
And then high as a kite on stage at E3, yeah.
Breathtaking. Thank you so much, Enlu.
You're welcome.
This fantastic. Really enjoyed that. Really looking forward to doing it again tomorrow. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us.
There'll be a lot of I guess tangible, applicable stuff tomorrow about pitching, because I wasn't just using my experience on the brand side. I also got the production team's opinion from the Square Enix collective. So it'll be like a well-rounded thing, not just marketing focus. Please come back.
Come back. See you tomorrow, guys.
Cool. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.